Hello everyone, and welcome to the last episode of Nurse Review Cells at Work Code Black. We have finally made it, and I reached my goal of finishing this series before I move out of this apartment. I also want to say thank you to everybody who has been liking and commenting and subscribing and to my channel and to all my videos. I really appreciate it, especially as somebody who's new to this whole YouTube thing. So last episode, we ended off on a little bit of a cliffhanger where there was a blockage in one of the coronary arteries, and that has caused what we call a cardiac arrest, where the heart has stopped and is no longer pumping out blood. So a cardiac arrest, that is probably super traumatic and scary for most people, but for me, it's like the exciting part of my work day. So I'm super pumped and excited to review this episode. A few of you have commented on the last episode that I should watch past the ending credits, so I will be doing that, and I can't wait to see what's in store for us. So without further ado, grab your drink of choice. The Magikarp mug is making its way back for the finale, and I just have some tea to drink on. But yeah, grab your drink of choice and let's dive right in.
なんだこの衝撃は。何が起きてやがる。おい！こっち来て見てみろ。内臓を守る肋骨にひびが。
Alright, so my guess is that because the heart has stopped, the person has essentially passed out and is unconscious, so somebody, I don't know who, has finally started chest compressions. So chest compressions are basically what you would do with somebody who no longer has a pulse. Now, chest compressions are very physically exerting, and they are very difficult to do if you are doing them correctly. Now here they mention that the ribs are cracked or cracking, and that is honestly really true. Now if you are doing chest compressions hard enough, then more often than not, then you end up cracking and breaking some ribs. While this does sound very painful, it is the better alternative than being dead. So yeah, the force that you should be using is you should be compressing to a depth of about 2 inches, which equals about 5 centimeters. And the rate you should be going at is about 100 to 120 beats per minute. Now, if you're wondering, how do you know how fast you're going? So actually the easy way, and we always say this, is when you're doing chest compressions to do it to the beat of Staying Alive by the Bee Gees. Or if you have a really dark and sick sense of humor like the rest of us, it also is the same beat and tempo as Another One Bites the Dust. But yeah, I do recommend and encourage everybody, including you guys, to please go get trained and certified in basic CPR. You never know when it's gonna come in handy. To be honest, the success rate of doing CPR for cardiac arrest outside of the hospital are pretty dismal, but that shouldn't stop you from trying. I can honestly tell you that I have worked with several patients who have actually been successfully resuscitated out in the community by a bystander, like at the store or like at a restaurant or something. And you know what? Those patients ended up walking out of the hospital alive back to their family and their friends and their jobs. And I just love hearing those success stories. So yeah, please go and get certified. You may end up saving a life.
これは心拍が復活したのか。
いえ、痙攣状態にあるだけです。依然正常な心拍は刻めていません。
痙攣状態。
心室細動、心臓が小刻みに痙攣、つまり細動してしまい全身に血液を送ることができない状態、窒性不整脈の一種。
Okay, so we are in ventricular fibrillation, or what we usually shorten as VF or VFib. So he mentions arrhythmias, and there's numerous types of arrhythmias. And these just generally refer to what is happening in the heart as well as what we would be observing on a ECG cardiac monitor. If we break it down, ventricular fibrillation, ventricular refers to the ventricles, and if you remember your basic heart anatomy, the ventricles are the two bottom chambers of the heart, and those chambers are responsible for pumping the blood out of the heart. Fibrillation refers to that quivering quality of the ventricles that he mentioned. So the way that it was explained to me is if you think of a bowl full of jelly that's just sitting there doing this. And this is opposed to a normal contraction where the ventricles kind of contract fully and are able to squeeze the blood out of them. So when the heart's doing this, the blood is just sitting there and not able to go anywhere, and that's why you do not have a pulse. One of the other fatal types of arrhythmias is very similar. It's called ventricular tachycardia, or VTAC or VT. So it looks like this on the monitor. It actually has like two different morphologies depending, but it's basically both VT. And VT is treated very similar to VF. The only difference is that it is actually possible to be conscious with VT. You're usually not conscious for very long because then eventually your blood pressure drops and you kind of pass out and then you end up going pulseless. But yes, you can be conscious with VT for a short time, but VF, you're always unconscious and pulseless. The other two, I don't know if they count as arrhythmias, but like the other two rhythms that can cause a cardiac arrest are asystole, which is that classic flat line, as well as pulseless electrical activity, aka PEA. PEA is just basically when you see a pretty normal, organized ECG rhythm on the monitor, but then when you look at the patient's dead and they don't have a pulse. Now here is a fun fact, and you can point this out to all your family and friends whenever you're watching like a medical scene or something like that. So VT and VF are what we call shockable rhythms. So these rhythms, you're able to grab your defibrillator and shock the patient out of those rhythms. With PEA and asystole, we call those non-shockable rhythms. So you actually do not defibrillate those rhythms. I mean, like, you could try, it just won't do anything, it won't work. So don't bother trying, you're wasting your time. But one of the most common mistakes I see in medical dramas and things like that is they always shock asystole. I do not know why, they always do it, and it's terrible. Drives me up the wall. The other thing that's fun to note that's in those code scenes is, you know how the doctor takes like this defibrillator paddles, rubs them together and goes, clear the patient, and it just goes right in. No, we don't do that anymore. We haven't done that for a very long time. I've been a nurse for 11 years and I have never once seen anybody use the defibrillator paddles. We actually have defibrillator pads. So these just like these thin foam pads that have an adhesive side on one side, and you just stick them to the patient's chest. That's it. But I guess that's not exciting enough for Hollywood, so they just always go to the paddles.
何が起きてるんだ。今度は何事だ。外部より心臓に対して継続的な刺激が加わっています。
Guaranteed this person is now being defibrillated or shocked, as we will say casually. And yeah, so like I said, if you're in VFib, you are definitely a candidate for defibrillation. The faster you can defibrillate somebody in this rhythm, the better your chances are of getting them back. I'm very fortunate that in the hospital setting I work in, we can usually respond to these very fast. And we've been in there and like shocked them in less than 2 minutes and like bam, had the patient back before the rest of the code team even arrived. So it's really cool to see.
AED 自動体外式除細動器心筋梗塞などで心臓が痙攣を起こしポンプとしての機能を果たさなくなった際電気ショックを与えて正常な心拍の再開を促す装置
Alright, so AEDs are automatic external defibrillators. Now these things are absolutely amazing, and at least here in Canada, there is all these campaigns to get AEDs installed in a number of public places, such as like sports arenas, recreational centers, shopping malls, and things like that, and to encourage businesses to invest in one of these because, like I said, you never know when it's gonna come in handy to save a life. So automatic external defibrillators are primarily for use for lay people who are not healthcare workers. Healthcare workers can use them, but we use a more complicated type of defibrillator in the hospital just because it has more settings and things like that. But yes, automatic external defibrillators, they are super easy. They come with everything you need. They have both written instructions, they have pictures, and they literally have a voice that comes on when you turn it, when you push the power button, and that voice will literally guide you through it. You cannot screw up. It is very difficult to screw up. So they actually have a really nice picture of an AED here. It may not look like the ones that you would see in your community because of course there's different companies and they all have different models and things like that. So they all look a little bit differently, but they all pretty much work the same. So they all come with just a few buttons to make it super easy. So you have your on off button, you have a charge button, you have a shock button. Every defibrillator should come with at least one set of pads. So you can see here that the pads have pictures that literally show you where to put them. So the standard placement is one under the right collarbone and then one on the opposite side. So kind of, here I'll stand up. So kind of right roughly about here on the side. And then once you have everything in place, you should already have it on, you plug it into the defibrillator, and the pads actually have the ability to read the heart rhythm. If the AED senses that the patient is in either VTAC or VFib, it'll tell you to shock the patient. And the buttons will literally flash at you and the voice will prompt you to push them.
何の音だなんだこりゃおお膨らみ始めたぞ離れろ総員退避なんだ今のは新種の細菌かおい見ろこれはプラークが押し広げられて道ができてる
All right, so our host body is incredibly lucky. He has clearly made it to a hospital, especially a hospital that has a cardiac catheterization lab. So a cardiac catheterization lab is where you would go in order to see a heart specialist who can sort of unblock a coronary artery. So basically what happens is they float a guide wire through an artery, usually either through the radial artery in your wrist or through the femoral artery in your groin. At the end of that guide wire is a balloon and a stent. So they can use the balloon to kind of push open that blockage and float what we call a stent into that area in order to keep that pathway open. Now the stents look pretty much exactly like that. It's basically like a metal mesh tube and they can come in different sizes and whatnot depending on what's needed. But yeah, it's super cool, super quick, very efficient.
ステント治療カテーテルを詰まってしまった冠動脈まで挿入し金属製の網目の筒ステントをバルーンで膨らませ血管を広げる治療法
If you're wondering what a angiogram and angioplasty look like in real life, I can cover that real quickly. But if you're not interested in me nerding out over it, then you can skip to this timestamp right here. For those of you who wish to actually see what this looks like in real life, I will give you a quick disclaimer that I am not an expert in this. I am not a cardiologist, nor am I a cath lab nurse. I am just a cardiac nurse that sees a lot of these, and I also have the benefit of working alongside some really great cardiologists who have taught me a lot over the years. So let me see, I've pulled up some pictures from Google. So what we see here in our first exhibit are normal coronary arteries. So when the doctor goes in with that guide wire, they inject the coronary arteries with a contrast dye, and then in the room there's this big x-ray machine that can take lots of different pictures at different angles, and it sees how that contrast dye flows through the arteries. So when the doctor goes in, they can only inject either the right side or the left side at a time. They can't do both. So in here we see normal coronary arteries. On the left picture is appropriately the left side of the heart. So you have your left main that branches out into the left anterior descending, or the LAD, as well as the left circumflex artery, or the LCX. The LAD is fairly easy to identify because that's the artery that just runs straight down the heart on the anterior or the front side. And the left circumflex kind of flexes around to the back of the heart. Now, these arteries primarily supply blood to the left ventricle. Remember, a blockage of the left anterior descending artery has a tendency to cause ventricular arrhythmia, such as ventricular fibrillation and ventricular tachycardia. And why is that? Because it supplies blood primarily to that left ventricle and a little bit to the right ventricle as well. It's so well known for this that, as I mentioned in my last video, it is known as the widowmaker. Now, if you look on the right side, you can see the right coronary artery, or the RCA. And the way you can identify it is, it's really just one big blood vessel. And the way I think about it is the RCA, and it's shaped like a C. Now, the way to identify if there's any disease or anything like that is normal coronary arteries will be nice and fat with very smooth walls like you see here. You shouldn't see any pinch points. You shouldn't see any like bumpiness to the walls. So yeah, these look like pretty decent coronary arteries to me. Maybe some mild disease here and there, but like really nothing. It looks pretty good. Next, here is actually a really nice series of images that demonstrate an angioplasty of the right coronary artery, or the RCA. So in picture A, you can see that there is a complete occlusion of that RCA. There is nothing getting past that point. And then in B, you can see that guide wire being floated through in order to get past that blockage. And because of that, it's managed to open up just enough to see just a little bit of blood flow in picture C, but really not enough to be satisfactory. In pictures D and E, you can see a balloon being inflated inside that artery in order to push that blockage open. And then finally in picture F, you can see the result of the cardiologist's hard work, and we finally achieve blood flow through the whole RCA. So in these next pictures, you can see again the left coronary arteries. So the circumflex and the LAD have both been identified and labeled. Thank God, takes the guesswork out of it for me. And they have arrows pointing at two diseased portions of the LAD. One is kind of upstream near the beginning of the LAD, and one is a little bit further down. And then in the second photo, you can see that they have opened up those blockages, and you can see much better flow through them. You can see the left circumflex is looking much better, so there's nothing to do there. It's just the LAD that they had to fix.
一刻も早く全身に酸素を運ばなくては細胞の壊死が始まってしまう。特にこの脳に甚大なダメージが残ればただでは済まない。
All right, so he's absolutely right. So when you don't have a pulse, you don't have blood pressure, and you don't have any circulation or oxygen traveling to any of your vital organs. So if you've had a long downtime where you've been out pulseless for a long period of time, that is absolutely going to affect all your organs and your entire body. It's not uncommon to see somebody who's, say, out in the community had 20 minutes of CPR. That's a fairly long time to go without a pulse. So 20 plus minutes out in the community getting CPR, and the patients, even if they are revived, a lot of them will have some brain injury. We call that an anoxic brain injury, and meaning none or nothing or lacking, oxic meaning oxygen. So the brain just wasn't getting enough oxygen in that period of time, and the cells have become damaged. Sometimes it's temporary, sometimes it's permanent, just kind of depends on the severity and how long the downtime was. So yeah, it's not uncommon to see somebody who has received CPR in the community come in, be revived, and even though they're awake and alert and stuff, sometimes they'll be just like confused and very lost and forgetful and things like that. Some, if it's very, very severe, if they had a very long downtime or they've had multiple instances of cardiac arrest, one after the other, that brain damage can be particularly severe and they may not recover from it, unfortunately. Other organs that are particularly sensitive to this lack of perfusion would be your kidneys off the top of my head. So again, not unusual to see some kidney damage related to that drop in blood pressure and lack of perfusion and oxygen. Just like the brain, sometimes it's temporary and we can treat it and the kidneys recover on their own. Other times, kidney damage can be pretty severe and they will need medical intervention for it. If a patient is still unstable after getting back a pulse after a cardiac arrest, there is something that we can do in order to preserve the brain cells, and that is what we call therapeutic hypothermia. This is where we put the patient into a medically induced coma, put them on life support, and then cool them and bring down their core body temperature in order to reduce the body's need for oxygen. All right, so here is the scene after the credits that all of you wanted me to watch. So let's go.
血管液が赤血球たちは下がっている。
はい。
何かが来る。
吸い込まれる。白血球さん。
離すんだ。お前も巻き込まれるぞ。
離しません。先輩先輩先輩よかったもう目を覚まさないのかと思いましたよここは一体鎖骨下静脈って書いてありますえ鎖骨下静脈だってさっき通った時はすっかり綺麗になってたはずなのに血管がボコボコまるで前みたいいや前よりブラックじゃないかまさかここは別の世界僕らのブラックな労働は終わらない
Oh wow, so it turns out our host body went and did a good thing, paid all his good luck forward and donated his blood, and that blood ended up in an even worse body. Man, I feel for them. That's awful luck. Anyway, I wonder if we're gonna get a second season then. I'd be really pumped if there was a second season of Code Black. But anyway, that concludes this episode and this series. So again, thank you all of you who have been liking and commenting and subscribing even. I really, really appreciate it, and I'm so thankful. And I hope you guys learned something. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Yeah, so that is all. So I'm signing off for next time. Next time, actually, I don't know what video I'll be doing next, but you should be seeing a different apartment next time. I'll probably be taking a few weeks off just so I can like move. And of course, work is always busy thanks to the pandemic. So yeah, probably gonna take a few weeks. But yeah, hopefully I come up with something new. I don't know what, but we shall see. All right, guys, I shall see you all next time. Bye.